We are back and we are joined now by Andrew R. Chow, Time Magazine technology correspondent, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Emma. It's great to be here.
So, what I love about your book is that you really do kind of lift a veil off of a lot of the effective altruism tactics of a guy like Sam Bankman-Fried and some of the, almost digital colonialist ambitions of this industry in particular. But I guess we should just start from the beginning about what cryptocurrency, the blockchain, NFTs are. If you don't mind explaining that to our audience and how it started as an industry.
There's a lot of people who just view crypto as a complete scam. When they hear the word, it's like a one-to-one. Crypto is a scam. There are actually a lot of sort of idealist underpinnings behind all of this. Not to say that they've come to fruition, but that there was at least some thought that went into the creation of this technology. It was formed in the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis, when there was sort of a crisis in confidence of all of the institutions that ruled our world. I mean, the banks, the government, the internet, all of these, hyper billionaires who were seemingly colluding to benefit themselves, to bail each other out. So Bitcoin is created at this time as sort of a potential alternative financial rail so that anybody could transact with anybody across the world, that you wouldn't need to go through middlemen, predatory middlemen like American Express or PayPal, that, a Federal Reserve wouldn't control that money supply. And so, that was the sort of initial goal, that you could use decentralized technology to build a fair financial system. The idea was championed both by libertarians who just wanted the government out of their money, but also some leftists, including in the Occupy movement, who thought that, a decentralized money could be fair, potentially. Obviously, things have shook out a little differently. And I think where Bitcoin is pretty different, potentially, from what its founders had imagined.
Did the founders also have kind of unregulated or perhaps illegal markets in mind at the beginning? I mean, how much of this was also using these kinds of transactions to buy drugs or things on the dark web that may be outside of regulations, etc.?
Yes. So it's important to know that the Bitcoin was created by this person named Satoshi Nakamoto. We have no idea who they are, and they've since vanished. So we can't really go back to Satoshi and ask him or her, what they were thinking. I think, they liked the idea of a money system outside of governmental overreach. Whether, specifically condoning illegal activity, who knows? But it's definitely true that in the year, just a couple years after Bitcoin's creation, that becomes illegal financial activity becomes, it's sort of like, it supercharges Bitcoin because, especially on the Silk Road,
Right.
Criminals are using Bitcoin to pay for drugs, prostitutes, weapons, everything imaginable. It goes back to this idea that Bitcoin they think that Bitcoin is anonymous, that they can transact across the globe anonymously, and that they're not going to be able to be traced. Now, the funny thing is that this idea has basically since been debunked because the blockchain it's a ledger of financial history.
It's
for
literally
everybody
in
to see.
The first definition of what the blockchain is that there's always a record of the transaction, which is integral to the central premise of the tech here, right?
Completely. So it's really funny. And eventually governments catch up, particularly the IRS. And there's a great book called Tracers in the Dark by Andy Greenberg, which is basically about the US government realizing, actually, we can trace this stuff even way better than cash. And, so if money if crypto is going across the blockchain and stays within the blockchain, you can't really trace it. But the minute that it gets cashed out to a bank account anywhere in the world, you can go get the subpoena or whatever, and you can find whoever cashed it out. So it actually becomes a really effective way for for the government to trace criminals. Not to say, but also it's still widely being used for crime because there are so many gullible people that are swimming in this space. So every year, billions and billions of dollars is being hacked and stolen via the blockchain. It's just now that the criminals are sometimes having a hard time getting it out.
It occurs to me that a lot of this coincided with the collapse of some of the more, extra legal networks on the internet at that time, like LimeWire or Napster or other. I mean, those were there were interactions being had there with that material. Was that framework kind of a part of crypto's beginnings?
I think it's really notable to look at all of these sort of like the ones you mentioned, LimeWire and Napster, and crypto as sort of a piece, like a singular or like an ideological pool about like peer to peer. The idea that the government or the internet was supposed to be this amazing peer-to-peer network. It became more and more centralized. So you have these systems that are trying to break that cycle, and also people with illegal motives swimming towards that as a way to make a quick buck.
And as you say the word centralized, then that gets to the central promise of cryptocurrency, which is that it would be decentralized. Can you explain what that means to people? Because it's clearly, I mean, we're dancing around it a little bit, but this has a libertarian bend to all of it, right? I mean, and even in the language that's discussed, it's anti-Federal Reserve. It's kind of like anti-state in terms of as it relates to what the function of the government is when it comes as it relates to currency. The liberals may have been taken in by it in the wake of the crash, but I feel like the picture of what crypto is quite fundamentally libertarian.
I think a lot of the most important early crypto thinkers were libertarian, and there was a lot of libertarians who flocked to crypto because it sort of matched exactly upon their beliefs. So I'm not going to deny that at all. I would say that, just to open up another perspective here, a lot of my book, I try to have it take place outside of the United States, because I think for most people in the US, they don't really understand crypto's use because it's not that useful. Like, we have payment rails that like basically work, like PayPal, and like Venmo is a peer-to-peer system where it's very easy to pay your friend or like a contractor with that. I think crypto's promise is potentially a little clearer in other places, either where that financial digital infrastructure hasn't come yet, or there are potentially oppressive governments that are trying to control money and how you can use it. So one of sort of the main locales in my book is Nigeria. In 2020, there are giant protests. It's called the End SARS movement in Nigeria, against this sort of special police force in Nigeria that was basically imprisoning and torturing civilians for no reason. And the only way that these protests could raise money against these injustices actually was through crypto at the time, because the government was working side by side with the national bank to basically shut down all donations to these protests. So this is, I mean, you can call it libertarian, but one of the sort of central points of the crypto community is like, say you have an oppressive government that's tracking how you want to spend your money, or, if they don't like a certain cause, then you can use crypto to circumnavigate that. Again, it's put into practice, it's shaky because the government actually is proven quite adept in tracking crypto funds. But yes, this is the promise of crypto, that you can transact outside of governmental overwatch.
And that promise makes more sense in the circumstances that you describe, right? I mean, it's, I think, less relevant for usage for some guy in Florida than it is for somebody in a country where the currency is extremely volatile and where there's a lot of, I think, there's a massive vacuum as it relates to people trying to get ahead. And that's where it seems like Sam Bankman-Fried's vision of effective altruism comes in to a degree where it's almost like working backwards from the fact that the demand and use case for cryptocurrency makes more sense in countries with very unstable currencies as opposed to in the United States or in the UK or something to that degree, to that effect. Um, I'm reminded
Yes.
again as a leftist of shock doctrine politics by Naomi Klein of when there are disasters or there's a vacuum that capital can fill that in sometimes very exploitative ways. And I guess that's where we get to SBF here.
Yeah, I'll start with your sort of larger point and then I'll pivot to SBF. I think you're absolutely right. And this is something that I'm always thinking about is like, yes, it's true that crypto potentially works better than like the systems in the countries with the worst regimes or with the most chaos. This is a point that's often brought up by crypto boosters. Like, yeah, when there's major instability, crypto provides that stability. But the idea that you are just like, you created a system that's maybe only slightly better than the worst case scenario doesn't
Right.
say anything about how well it's going to work as a potential like global financial infrastructure. So yes, I think that's a great point. Moving on to Sam. Okay, so Sam Bankman-Fried is my age. He's 32 years old. He was anointed the richest 29-year-old in the world by Forbes just 3 years ago. He had a massive fortune of about $18 billion. He had created and this is on paper,
Yes.
he created a $32 billion crypto empire of a few different things. He had an exchange, and then he had basically like a trading firm that was playing incredibly risky games with crypto, just packing risk upon risk upon risk. So Sam, a lot of people in crypto want to disown him because they say Sam isn't an ideological crypto guy. And actually, this is true. The folks that I talked to early in his life basically said that Sam was very skeptical of crypto and its usefulness for society early on. But he saw this immense opportunity of just making as much money as possible. So Sam was on Wall Street as many 20-somethings and ambitious 20-somethings in New York. He was trying to make as much money as he could because he believed in this thing called effective altruism and a certain sect of it which believed that if you were good at math, you should just make the most amount of money possible and then give it away to vetted causes. So he thought about, going to a nonprofit or something, but he concluded, or he was basically advised by the effective altruist folks, like, no, you're really good at math, you're really good at trading. Just go to Jane Street and make a ton of money and then donate it all away. And so he did that for a while, but then he saw that in crypto, the amount of arbitrage you could do, was way more profitable in crypto than Wall Street because it's so volatile, right? So if you're a good trader and it's really volatile, you can find the cracks where there's a difference and you can just make a ton of money, basically. So he comes into crypto not caring about these decentralized ideals at all. And he basically is making money while he's centralizing crypto. So the whole point, one of the central points of crypto is that there's no middleman between you and your money, that you know where your money is on the blockchain, you access it yourself, and then you trade it peer to peer. But Sam creates FTX, which is an exchange, which is basically just like, hey, you have some crypto, just you can park it here with us
It's a
in the
middleman.
Bahamas. It's the most centralized middleman that you can get. And then but meanwhile, he's adopting all of crypto's talking points. And some of them are related to Africa and these, the third world rhetoric of we're going to bank the unbanked and we're going to let all these people who had no access to the global financial ecosystem and let them in. And basically all he's doing is creating his own unregulated crypto bank that holds people's money. And then he's not telling them that he's taking their money and he's investing the depositors' money in the most risky crypto ventures imaginable. And it's going really well, and the pie is growing until it collapses, and then it all disappears.
And can you explain to folks how he took the money from the exchange and put it into another entity without really any oversight to make some of these risky trades?
So Sam is American, but he's not running FTX in America because the licenses that he would have to get in America, he did not like and care for. Instead, he decamps to the Bahamas, where there's a much looser regulatory regime. And he's basically he's running this pseudo non-regulated bank out of the Bahamas, where there's just like, he doesn't have a board of directors. He doesn't really have audits. He doesn't have any sort of checks and balances there. It's just like him and his, friends managing billions and billions of dollars. So there are different sort of like mechanisms that he uses. Some of it is just that it's all going into like one bank account, when that for some people, when they deposit their money into FTX thinking that it's kept in FTX, it's not. It's just going into Sam's big pool. There was no separation of church and state, and then he was just taking money out and he was putting it into, I mean, a lot of it is investments, but he's putting it into Bahamian real estate. He's putting it into US presidential elections, and there's just no one checking him on this at all.
And you mentioned how he was donating to candidates. Can you speak about that strategy as well? Because he was publicly donating to Democrats and less publicly donating to Republicans.
Yes. And this relates to actually what's going on right now, in terms of crypto and the elections that we can get to. But yeah, so Sam basically puts himself forward. Okay, so Sam was amazing at crafting his public image. He had this giant unruly mane of hair. He only wore basically like shorts and a bad t-shirt. There's this famous image of him on stage with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton at a his own crypto conference. And Clinton and Blair are wearing suits, and he's just at the beach. He's wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And he's doing this because it puts him in this lineage of Silicon Valley geniuses who like are terrible dressers, but maybe if they're like putting less time into their outfit, then they're putting all of their brain energy into, the really important things, which is to make as much money as possible or whatever. And so one of the other optics he realizes helpful is to donate to Democrats. He openly tells a reporter after it all comes down that, if you donate to Democrats, then, the left wing, the liberal media is going to be more favorable to you. And if you donate to Republicans, they'll all freak out. So he enters in 2020. He's the third biggest donor to Biden's campaign I think it's behind like Soros and Bloomberg. And he's sort of making his mark that he's going to be sort of a centrist left, sensible, pro-tech Democrat, in the way that, Obama had cozied up to the Silicon Valley industry just, a generation before. And he's giving all these interviews about how, like the alliance between tech and Democrats and crypto and Democrats, and they're notable Democrats who get on board with his vision. But this posture is false, because he's set up this sort of elaborate donation scheme that involves his brother, actually, in which they're funneling money through different channels and different PACs and stuff to give to both to Democrats and Republicans. And basically, they're just trying to get pro-crypto regulation, and they're trying to attack weak spots and see, are there Democrats that might be more favorable? One of the Democrats, actually, he donates a bunch to is Maxwell Frost, a Gen Zer who might be more, I guess, susceptible is a, accusatory word, but, as a younger member of Congress who might be more amenable to, talk of, the idea of financial innovation. So yeah, he set up this whole rig where he's donating millions and millions both to Democrats and Republicans, just with the goal of getting more pro crypto legislators and friendly legislators in the halls of Congress.
And this fight continues to this day on that front because crypto's trying to make a resurgence in this election cycle, and we'll get to that in just a second. But the parts that you wrote about, I mean, you profiled in your book a Nigerian artist, this other woman, Christine from Taiwan, just some of the people who were at the front lines of this. Can you remind, now that the crypto crash happened, right? And there were a lot of people heavily invested in this industry who maybe don't have, say, like Sam, professor parents or like a cushion. I mean, he's going to jail for quite a long time, but at least in theory, some of these people who were doing it for pure speculation as opposed to making their career on it. Why did you think it was important to highlight some of these people, and what does it say about the crypto industry broadly?
Yes. So I think it's important really to stress that crypto is not one type of person. There are all sorts of ideologies and weird types of subcurrents in crypto. And especially in 2021 and 2022, crypto was like the craziest Renaissance fair imaginable because there were artists and there were gamblers and there were venture capitalists and there were scientists and there were all these, just like people who really believed in this idea that blockchain was going to upend every portion of society, that we were going to put like medical records on the blockchain, and that blockchains were going to upend all sorts of organizations. And there's this guy named the blockchain socialist who I actually really like, who is like thinking about how to use the blockchain to build more co-op structures. So there's all these people that are coming in, and especially in 2021 during the pandemic, there's this big sort of, I mean, now we know it as a myth of NFTs as like this sort of new digital cultural force, that NFTs are going to be really good for art and artists around the world to be able to put their art in front of new collectors and sort of rewrite the rules of how artists and culture makers are going to rise. Another sort of popular idea during this time is the idea of like, what if you and a collective could create a new decentralized Disney, that you could create a new Mickey Mouse, and then instead of like Disney owning it, then you could create and own these new set of characters that are going to become the next Disney or the next Marvel. Right. So crypto, the idea of crypto, like, infects the minds of so many people around the world who ostensibly have good intentions or just want to create good art or a good TV show. And I follow some of these characters around the world who previously had no access either to the US financial system or the US cultural system, and wanted to weigh in, and became really successful because there was such a bubble. There was so much money sloshing around, and were able to share their ideas on a global stage. And then it collapsed. All the money evaporated, and now crypto has returned in price, but the idea of NFTs has really eroded, and there are very few people right now. Like when you turn on the TV and if there's anybody talking about crypto, it's like Andreessen Horowitz or like hedge fund guys who are talking about crypto as an investment. They're really not talking about like helping the artists in Africa or the gamers in Indonesia or anything like that. So I think there was a lot of disillusionment that came out of crypto as a global social change maker, and now the arguments for it are sort of they're very big still, but they're much narrower.
And it's interesting that you bring up the hedge funds, because that seems to me, at least from the outside, behind a lot of the resurgence in 2024 of this kind of public lobbying to say, okay, Harris, you got to be more friendly to the crypto industry. There's also like this push that led, honestly, by two of the two senators in my state of New York, but Gillibrand in particular, on the Democratic side, to regulate crypto. And you mentioned that Bankman-Fried was pushing for regulations. Well, that would formalize crypto, right? And that's part of what they want. So how have they pivoted in their influence campaign in this election, and is regulation a part of that?
Yes, we're swimming in very muddy waters here, as you correctly note, because, the crypto industry they want regulation, they want to prevent, or they're saying, we want to prevent the next SBF. But really, they're trotting out basically all of the same sort of policy proposals that Sam himself advocated for. And a lot of the same tactics, they're not being shady about it in terms of targeting both, sides of the aisle. They're doing it out in the open. So Public Citizen last week released a report just 5 days ago that I think if you're leftist or really anybody in the country, I think should take a look at, because they basically found that crypto is outspending big oil. They're outspending the Coke industries. They're outspending the banks right now. Half of the corporate money into this election is coming from crypto this year. That's, over $150 million flowing in, mostly from 4 companies. So that's Andreessen Horowitz, Coinbase, Ripple. These are crypto companies. And they're loud. They're flooding money into congressional races. Their lobbying presence on the Hill is oversized, and they are talking a big game about basically trying to, get regulation for crypto. And as you said, they do want regulation, but they want crypto normalized. They want it part of the American financial institutions. And so, we're seeing Trump on one side, Trump wholeheartedly endorsing crypto, saying, we want US to stockpile a giant reserve of it. We're seeing Cynthia Lummis in Wyoming saying,
well, how can you trust the US Treasury to hold all this crypto? What? Go on, sorry.
Yes. So because I would say, there's a lot of Republicans now who it's just like very easy for them to be pro crypto because it's like pro finance, pro industry, like less regulation. But a lot of money is flowing into the Democrat side too. Because there are people like Gillibrand and others who are like, we want crypto regulation. Like, we don't want people to be scammed. So we want crypto regulation as well. And then once you get in the details, it's really hard to square where is like pro industry and what's pro. So yeah, there are a handful of Democrats who are warming to this idea. There was a Harris aide who gave a quote last week that, Kamala wants to, help the industry thrive.
Right.
But Kamala hasn't said anything herself, so it's unclear, what she would actually do. But yeah, I think the most important thing is how much money is coming in from crypto corporations on a scale that's kind of unprecedented to these elections. And, in such a contested year, they are making in terms of their money, they're going to make a difference in the Senate and the House.
And how much of it is also, as you said, like the hedge funds having a lot of crypto, or, other big financial institutions getting in on this fad when it was exploding? Jamie Dimon, I think, came out publicly and said, I wouldn't be involved in that. And so it's not all the banks, right? But it seems to me like the persistence of their lobbying efforts has to do with the fact that these financial institutions made bets that immediately fell apart on crypto when that crash happened, and they still have these holdings that they're holding on to that they want to see get back to where they once were.
Andreessen Horowitz has long been one of crypto's biggest backers and did put an obscene amount of money into the crypto industry during the last cycle. Obviously now they're very invested in AI, but yes, so it goes back to this idea that, it's Andreessen Horowitz, they just want more money, less taxes for themselves. And they want to see these twin tech industries grow really fast. In terms of the banks, so there's a type of financial, I guess, product called a Bitcoin ETF that the Biden's SEC, they tried to tamp down. They were overturned. So these ETFs hit the market this year. It basically lets your average person, buy a financial, like it's a tool that basically lets you buy into Bitcoin without actually having to own it. So this becomes more attractive to just like the idea of some sort of investor who, wants some exposure to Bitcoin because, it's highly volatile. It could go up, it could go down. But if you bought Bitcoin in 2020 and are still holding it now, it did, multiply by 8 or 9 times. So all of these people who are used to risk, just like saying, all right, we know that Bitcoin's risky. We know it could go to zero, but we're going to put a little bit of our portfolio in because of diversifying. And so that is helping sort of grow the pie of Bitcoin, even if Bitcoin is no more useful in terms of any practical applications than it was 4 years ago. There's just all these money managers, like institutionalized money managers now who are like, well, what the hell? We can afford this risk.
Really, really appreciate your time today. Andrew R. Chow, Time Magazine technology correspondent, author of Cryptomania, Hype, Hope, and the Fall of FTX's billion-dollar fintech empire. We will put a link to your book in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.